We have another return guest on the podcast this week. Mark Dillon is stepping into the 11, and we have a conversation that is really going to be valuable for all of you young players out there that are listening. Any of you parents as well of young players that are listening and want to kind of understand what it's like to go over and play in Europe. What are some of the rules that actually apply to young foreign players when they want to go and play for a European academy? And where sometimes there can be some pitfalls and people can lead them in the wrong direction. So we have a really great conversation. We also talk about college soccer a little bit and kind of the crazy world that it is right now post-COVID. So I think it's a really valuable conversation for those of you who are interested in any of those endeavors, college, Europe. It would be a really great listen for you. I say it in the beginning of the episode, but there are a couple episodes you can go ahead and check out if you want to hear more from Mark Dillon. This is his third time back on the podcast, so always happy to have him on and chat football. So without further ado, let me kick it over to our conversation. All right. Welcome back. Well, first, let me say welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, but welcome back to Mark Dillon to the podcast. Before I formally introduce him, I'll just say to anyone that's listening, if you want some more information or context kind of on Mark's story and what the Talent Project is, I would encourage you to go back and listen to episode 14 or episode 31 to learn a little bit more, as we had two different conversations about both the Talent Project and then also Whispering Talent. But with that out of the way, Mark, thanks so much for rejoining us.
Great to be here, Brendan.
So, as you said there before we jumped on the recording, a couple days now off the plane from Germany. How was the most recent trip with the boys in Germany this past year?
Well, we just wrapped up our first contiguous school year that didn't have major COVID interruption. We had a few, but nothing that's completely stopped us in our tracks. And we did real well. We had our group grew. We had a lot of our players got professional trials. We're zeroing on close to 45% of our players getting at least one trial. But we had 41 total trials for our players in the last year. Two of the guys have just signed with 1860 Munich on 2-year deals, and we've got another one going into the Austrian Bundesliga. And we have MLS looking at a couple of our boys right now. And then there's a couple guys that are underage, under 18, that don't have European passports, who are very definitely on the radar of professional clubs in Europe. So it's been a really good year. We're growing a little bit more for the next season in Germany and very enthusiastic about getting started. We're discovering new talent all over the country right now.
Yeah. How rewarding has it been for you to, this has kind of been your baby a little bit, to see this grow now into this place where you're affording these opportunities for all these young players in Europe?
Well, it's exciting. And we're not only because we're showing results. Our players are doing extraordinarily well. We are shaking up the market. We are great disruptors in the U.S. market because we're kind of changing paradigms a little bit, and which is what we wanted to do in the first place. And the word is getting out, the brand is getting out, so we're seeing a lot of success and a lot of growth, and we want to make sure we manage that correctly.
Segueing off of that disruption that you speak of in the market, and I think you'd be better to speak on this than me, but I think I've noticed kind of a shift of the goalpost, so to speak, with American players. And I mean it in a positive way, meaning, it seems maybe a decade ago or years ago, the goal for American players was to play at the biggest school that they could, right? They wanted to play for Stanford or Duke or North Carolina. And now the goalposts, as I mentioned, are in a different spot. They are, I want to play in Europe. And not only I want to play in Europe, but I want to play in Europe at the highest possible level with some of the biggest clubs in the world, because now we have that representation and that track record of proving that American players can do that and hold their own at that level. As you speak to young American players and also you now are bringing them over to this environment, is that kind of the mindset shift that you are seeing as well from players coming up the ranks?
Well, absolutely, because the players they're getting better all the time. Coaches are getting better all the time, and I think it's really important to know that our guys are now part of a global community. They're watching the same games and reading the same reports as the guys in Germany or the Netherlands or France or whatever, England. And and they're aspiring to that. They're seeing these games at like these ridiculously high levels, and that's, of course, any athlete. It doesn't matter whether you're a football or baseball or basketball or whatever it is. You're always aspiring to where the glamour is and the highest levels. And our players are no different. The difference is that our players are starting to get good enough to where some of them have a realistic chance at it. So we're trying to bridge that gap for them. We're trying to provide that pathway for them into the market, even if they're not officially eligible under FIFA law. We can get them prepared to be eligible under FIFA law, and I think that's kind of the service that we're providing for Americans right now.
So what are the conversations like when you speak to clubs that are interested in bringing American players in? Because I think now, really, as we just mentioned there, the conversation amongst players is different in terms of what they set their sights on, but it's also different in terms of what clubs are going to look at. There's been players who have gone to Europe in the past where they've said there's been a clear kind of stigma about what the American player is coming over into a European environment. I think that narrative is kind of shifting and starting to change. So what do you notice in those conversations you have with, those giants of the Bundesliga or in Austria or wherever sprinkled throughout Europe?
Well, for starters, I mean, again, they're starting to see Americans as, in a sense, the new Africa. You had the 70s and 80s, and they were finding these unbelievable talents out of places like Cameroon and Nigeria and Senegal and Ivory Coast. And a lot of times they weren't able to settle in as well into Europe. And I did have some experience working with some players also from West Africa, but a lot of times the cultural jump was really, really deep for them. And when you get American players, they tend to, what they're being recognized as, they adapt quickly. They're intelligent. They have really good work ethic. They bring something extra into the dressing room in terms of positivity, and they like that. But I think more importantly is that if you give them a chance to really adapt, they can do it quickly, more quickly than, for example, a lot of players who, we all have language difficulties, and we try to bridge that gap also with the language training that we do. But there's a broader acceptance for players. Now you look at it, we had 10 players and a coach in the Champions League in this last Champions League, and that's pretty incredible because before we think, my God, if we had even one, we're really at a growth stage. We're really starting to be appreciated in the soccer world. But now you start to see at the big clubs like Chelsea and Juve and so on and so forth, Dortmund, where the Americans are starting to appear, and they're not just appearing; they're real contributors.
Yeah, it's why it's the kind of timeline of it is something that's so fascinating to me because I think in a way it makes me respect the players who have done it, a decade ago. I look at the Clint Dempseys of the world or the Tim Howards, that kind of were some of those trailblazers in that regard, where, like I said, that the narrative about what a U.S. soccer player was, I mean, even just the fact that I used the word soccer right there would make people in Europe kind of roll over and groan at me. But the narrative now, like we said, has shifted. And as much as it's sometimes frustrating for me to look at soccer from a business perspective or football from a business perspective, that kind of is what you have to do at certain points. And like you mentioned there, Americans are like this new frontier now. It's like the gold rush going out into the West, and nobody wants to be the ones that missed out on a new young up and coming talent. And now everyone kind of wants to try their hand with bringing an American, whether it be a coach or whether it be a player, into their environment. But I have to imagine, as you now see it really on the front lines, that there's a lot of positive that comes with that, but there's also some challenges coming into being, the new exciting thing on the market, but you're kind of having to navigate that for the players as well, because these are just young people at the end of the day. They're teenagers.
You're right, and there is a dark side to all this. There's a lot of light coming in from American players, but I think it's really important to note that the higher you go up the food chain, the potential for dirty things happening goes up with it. Anytime there's a lot of money involved, you start to circle around it. And, one of the things that we deal with, and one of the things we've had to deal with, and unfortunately in a less pleasant manner in the last year, was that a lot of times you have agents coming in and talking to players that are completely unauthorized. and they're making promises that they shouldn't be making because they can't. And yet
Yeah.
they fill players' heads with ideas and ways that they can get around the rules and systems and things like that, and it causes an awful lot of problems. And so, and even in the United States, it's happening because I just had a real good conversation with a director of one of the top youth clubs in the U.S. And he was saying, "You're not going to believe the number of agents that are at the game. They're coming to the game. And they're not only after looking for pros, they're looking for kids that are 12, 13 years old. So what's the matter with you guys? Stay away and let the kids grow and develop and stuff like that. And yet they're trying to seduce kids and the families into, we got contracts waiting for you. I can do all these things. You can't. There's the Talent Project was created because you can't get in if you're under 18 unless you have very extraordinary circumstances, including a European passport. And even then, you have to be 16. And so, when you have people that are coming in and saying, "Okay, well, don't worry, I can get you around. I got all these players into the system," it's BS.
Yeah.
Because the penalties are for violating FIFA law are quite severe now, and nobody's messing around with it. So,
Yeah. So I think in our audience, we probably have, players, coaches, fans of the game of all different levels. So can you maybe
mhm.
provide context to somebody who's not as well versed in the intricacy of professional football into why would an agent be showing up on the touchline to watch an under 14s match? You know what I mean? Like, why would that even be occurring?
Well, agents there's something like almost $700 million or euros rather, which is even higher, have gone into the pockets of agents. And these are just agents' commissions, and they operate the same as malpractice lawyers and things like that. I don't want to put down the law profession by any stretch, but they're coming in. They see a lot of times they'll see a player as a client, and all they have to do is make the introduction to the club. If the club player is good enough, then he gets a commission out of the deal. And sometimes the commissions are insanely high. It's not just like, okay, well, give me, some guys. There's some very good agents out there that are ethical too. So I'm not throwing them all under the bus, but you see agents say, okay, look, I want 3 million or 4 million if I bring my player into your, if I get him a signature for you guys. That's the paycheck. That's the deal. The player is nothing more than a commodity, nothing to do with representation or management. And so
Yeah.
this is where things go astray, and even you hear about 14-year-olds going into within countries. For example, in England, I heard a 14-year-old transferring for over £1 million, and the kid is at 15 making like 10,000 a month to play for Premier League Academy. Give me a break. What are you doing to these kids? But
Yeah.
that's the
And
competition. Talent's expensive.
it certainly is. And I guess I have a more of a personal question on my side of it. Like, how do you balance between the reasoning why clubs bring in younger players, right, is because of what their potential could necessarily be, right? You bring in a 16, 17, 18-year-old, maybe in the rare circumstances with the Jude Bellinghams where they can go and step into the first team right away. But most of the time, it's kind of what their potential will look like by the time they mature a little bit more physically. But how do you, besides it just being, I feel like sometimes a bit of a crapshoot into knowing when a player is actually going to develop into that way, like how can you even go on the touchline and watch a 14 or 15-year-old and say, without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to be the one? Or is it just like you cast your net kind of as wide as you can and bring the talented players up and hope for the best? I look at it from the outside and I'm just a little bit perplexed by it.
Well, I mean, there's talent everywhere, and I think the missing link is in education and how that talent is being managed, and that's a really important point. And I know that I can say definitively that nobody knows at 14, no matter how good the player is
Yeah.
or how average the player is, nobody knows for sure. Nobody can. There's no exact art for or exact science for saying this kid is a sure bet. You could think they're a sure bet, but all sorts of things have to happen along the way. I think a lot of things have to come together between that time at 14 or 15 and the time that they might be thinking about, or a club might be thinking about putting them on a senior professional contract. And so there's just a thousand things that could go wrong. You'd look at a player that could be absolutely spectacular at 12 to 14, and then really, really good at 15, and then pretty good at 16 or 17, and then at 18 he's out, he's gone.
Yeah.
And you see another kid who's 14 or 15, and so he's middle of the pack, something there, but middle of the pack. 16 or 17, oh, something's coming, and then at 18 they say, where the hell did this kid come from? Well, he's been under your nose all this time, but he just, he's like this seed that was waiting to pop. Like all
Yeah.
of a sudden all this talent comes out. But this is about management, and this is about education and development, and this is why it's so important that we don't miss those steps, because very, very rarely is anybody talented enough to make it, that to just to go from A to Z without taking those intermediate steps. It's almost
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah. And I know you and I have had extensive conversations about this, but it seems as if kind of the talent project was born out of all of this chaos, right? There was all this noise kind of around the player and around clubs and around management and agents, that you felt like there was this way for you to provide more value to the players, which at the end of the day, I talk to other coaches that I work with. Sometimes we think it's comical the way in which we treat the game sometimes, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to do what's best for these players, and I think from your perspective, do you see it as you now have this opportunity to not only educate players from the game side of it on how to become better footballers, but also, how to maybe progress a little bit culturally and as humans, and also then you can shield them or protect them a little bit from those external forces of agents are coming in and making promises they can't keep, or clubs, or so on and so forth. You're able to kind of help them navigate that process a little better than maybe an unsuspecting parent.
Well, it does. It gets back to education, and part of that education is designed to both narrow the gap between what they know about how to be a professional and what they need to know about learning to be a professional. And most of the time, they come in with a lot of talent, but very little understanding of really what that means. And so that education is very, very important. And then the follow up to that is stacking the odds in favor of being more successful, because they're, regardless of the talent, there's a lot of reasons why a good player won't make it, even if he's talented enough, because he's just got all kinds of things weighing on him. It could be jet lag. They could be, the game is just a lot faster and they haven't made that adjustment. They don't understand the technical nuance. They don't speak the language. They're homesick. They don't like the food. The weather is different. The playing surfaces. All these things can aggregate and conspire against talent. And this is why, I said before, and I said on the previous podcast, that, you look at a Pulisic or a Gio Reyna or so, the player Weston McKennie that have gone over and made a big success. There's 20 players for every one of them that are probably nearly as talented, if not as talented, that just didn't make it. And so that the education component is so critical. And I think that when you look at the really, really successful clubs, I'm talking about the Ajaxes and the Dynamo Zagrebs of the world, and the Liverpool and Bayern. 1860 Munich is one of the top on Dortmund. But anyway, we can go on and on about that. But they all emphasize development and education, and they in a very, very serious way. And they say straight off, this is serious work. We're not just putting youth teams out there so we can say, hey, look, we got our nice youth teams, they're winning trophies. This is serious work, and they hire serious people and they fund it correctly, because it's no different. If you look at a top level club that really takes their youth development seriously, it's no different than R&D at Apple or Microsoft. They're creating the products of the future, and so they take that really seriously. And so that component, the education component, is really important, and it's too often overlooked in favor of, just let's look at competitive results. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a bit of why agents sort of get a bad rap, is because I think they look at it from the bit more of the statistical side that you mentioned there. Well, if I get 20 players out there into certain environments, maybe one will hit or maybe two will hit. Whereas the club kind of looks at it from the opposite perspective of they want to do right by as many of their players that are in their club and wearing their badge as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why a bit of the agents sort of have this, nefarious mindset that a lot of people view, because they're looking at it. They just want that one ticket, that one player that's going to be able to kind of cash out for them.
Yeah, well, I think we all want the same thing. I mean, we all want to find that star, but the question is, how do you do it?
Yeah.
And are there moral and ethical boundaries in place in order to make sure that you're doing that with the player in mind, not just the footballer? Because otherwise, the kid, the player, whatever it is nothing more than a commodity, and that usually is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, 100%. So let's say, for example, I'm a young player in an MLS academy, or just a young promising player in the United States, and I only have a US passport, right? And I'm 16 years old. Maybe walk me through, what are some of the things that an agent or someone might come up to me and say, trying to get me to maybe come over to Europe or something like that. What are some of these things that you're experiencing that promises are being provided to players that really can't be held up on the other end of the bargain?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with an agent or an advisor, whatever, that's saying I can bring you into a club and give you an exposure about that. But you have to make very clear that you're having honest expectations out of that, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to be very, very clear that, hey, if you're an American kid and you're 16 years old, there's almost no chance for you to get signed. There is no chance to get signed unless we can find extremely, extremely rare circumstances. Now, FIFA law, Regulation 19 was promulgated by FIFA in 2001, and then there was a gray area for about 7 or 8 years, of which nobody really clearly defined it. And then by 2009, it was it came into full force, where clubs were being penalized and sanctioned for it. And basically, what this says is it was designed because of exploitation by unscrupulous agents and managers that would bring in African kids or South American kids or some people from outside the European Union into Europe, very often for almost extortionary fees and exorbitant fees, certainly. And then if they didn't make it, they just abandoned them. And then you see these kids on the beach in Crete or someplace like that selling knockoff watches and Louis Vuitton bags and things like that. They just abandoned them, and it wasn't one or two cases; it was thousands. And FIFA said we have to do something about that. So they just said right across the board. And it's unfortunate because a lot of really good kids have been punished by this law, but it says no one under 18 can make an international transfer unless it's 16. You can do it if you're an American and you have a dual passport, such as two of our guys have had who just signed, or if your parents are living in that country for reasons that have no link to football. And that means that, for example, like a Weston McKennie, for example, was playing in Germany when he was a kid because his father was stationed there in the U.S. Army. Russell Canoose, I believe he plays for DC United now, but he was at Hoffenheim, and he went through the youth system there and had quite a lot of success in the academy. His father had a business over there. And so it was fairly easy to prove that, well, my family's living with me because I own my business over here. And there's been exceptions for that. But it's so difficult to get a kid in. And so when talking about bringing a kid in, that there's wonderful education, exposure value to that for them to see it. But we have to be realistic and say, if you're not 18, you're not going to get a contract. And you might get. Sometimes they do options, and sometimes they do pre-con. Those are possibilities, but they're rare.
What does that look like? What is a pre-contract for somebody that maybe doesn't know what that is?
Well, they might say a kid is 18 months. For example, so say he's a year out of his 18th birthday, and the club says we really want him, and we think that if we don't get him, somebody else is, as our competition will. So they'll say, "I'll give you a contract dated for your 18th birthday." And that means that we have that right. Now, sometimes they will pay an option for that, or they just give you an option and say, okay, we're going to pay the right to sign you at 18. Here's the figure that we offer, and for that option to sign you, you cannot negotiate with anybody else for a period of time after your 18th birthday. We have the right to sign you, and if we say, okay, we decide we don't want you, well, you've made some money on the deal and you move on. But sometimes this exists. I know of a couple American players that were signed under those terms, but we have to be really clear about it because it's more far more the exception than the rule.
Yeah. Would you if a player was being offered something like that, what would be kind of the things that you advise him to look for or maybe to avoid if they're going to be considering an opportunity like that?
Well, first you want to know if it's realistic because a lot of times the agents are just trying to stack up their client stable, and they're taking players that probably have no business trialing at a club such. If you take a modest level American player and say, I'm going to get you a trial at Dortmund, that's probably not going to last more than a day. And that agent will probably never be welcome in Dortmund again. And so this is why some of these things have to be managed relatively clearly. But, in terms of, in terms of that, you want to make sure that you have people that are matching the talent with the opportunity. And you don't have to go to Dortmund or Bayern Munich or Red Bull Salzburg or something like that to have a really good experience of playing, because there's very, very high levels across the board. And I think anytime a player has an opportunity to go in and he gets to train and he gets to see what the level is like, good levels like, and he gets to see the level of environment, there's going to be a paradigm shift. And even if he's going over for okay, let's clearly define this is 10 days. This is not a professional trial. You're going to get an opportunity to train and experience it. They're going to come back a little bit different. There's no question about it, because their brains are expanding. They're seeing the world. They're seeing that there's a lot more than what they're traditionally experiencing at home, and so they want more of that, and that feeds that motivation. So that could be a really good thing. But again, you don't want, and we've had problems with one unscrupulous agent in particular making promises he has no business making, that he can't possibly keep. And the players think that, oh, well, this guy's got some sort of magic wand and he can and work this magic for us, and it causes disruption. It causes players. It causes demotivation of players because they realize that they've been they haven't had the success, or they haven't had the opportunity that was promised to them, and it's just very disruptive.
So would that maybe be what you would advise to a young player that's in the States that really doesn't have any of those exceptions, as we spoke about, to be able to get themselves over to Europe? Would it maybe be to continue to try and play at the highest level that you can in the United States and see if you can get opportunities to come over to European clubs and train, during your off seasons or something like that, to experience the culture and experience if that's something that may be of interest to you? Because, I think maybe a player might be listening and thinking, if there are so many exceptions and it's a really difficult path for me to do that, but I still want to do it, how can I do it? Because I want to get over there as early as I can to be able to try and make a career for myself.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of professionalism involved with this. It doesn't happen willy nilly. And for starters, the big clubs, it's a lot more difficult than people think to have a club to say, hey, how about I'm going to call my friend who's a coach at Borussia Dortmund or Bayern Munich and say, hey, can this American kid come over and train with you? And most of the time, 99% of the time, they're going to say, what, are you kidding me? We're not here to develop young American players. If they say, okay, listen, I got a player that could be really hot for your future, and that person is trusted because he's reliable with talent, then he might be able to open that door. But again, when a person recommends a player to a club, his reputation's on the line. You can only fail once. And anytime a player is recommended and they say, what the hell did you send me this player for? That's the last time they'll ever take a phone call. So you want to make sure that you're managing situations like that. Now, players, you can't get into Europe, and I think the good news is that things are getting better in the United States with the amount of investment that's going on with MLS and the coaches training that's going on, and the amount of information that's coming into academies to help them manage themselves better and create higher standards. That's very, very encouraging. It's still not there. You still can't replicate Europe. But players should obviously be, if they're really ambitious, they need to be playing at the highest possible level. But then if you look for opportunities, and this is why the Talent Project has basically existed, we can't tell our players that when they're 16 or 15 years old that we're going to get them a contract, but we can only tell them that we can prepare them in a way that gets them a lot closer to professional behaviors on the field. And then after that, the opportunities more or less take care of themselves, or they don't take care of themselves according to how well they develop. But most of the time, we've seen that our players, when they develop, they're being seen. They're being culturally adapted. Now they've got some management of the language. Now they understand systems of play. They're adapted to the environment over there, and so they're watched and they're tracked, and they can see. I saw him play 3 or 4 times. I really like this kid. Bring him in. I know he's not eligible yet, but bring him in because maybe we can develop a relationship with him. But he's there. He's not just coming in for a week. He's already in Germany, and he's become part of that system, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I have to imagine that immediately makes the prospective player, that much more intriguing to a club when they've seen now you have this pedigree of not only you can play at a high level, but you've been in this country for a while, you've acclimated to the culture, at least to a certain degree, and you've acclimated to what our football is like. And so now that player, if we look at the idea of the commodity or the asset, which again, I know is sometimes frustrating to do when we look at youth players, but that player is a little bit more valuable because that adaptation process will probably take a little bit less time for that player to kind of get involved with that team, I have to imagine.
Well, that's true. It's exactly right, Brendan. They're that breaking in period is we do the breaking in period for them, and so we provide that for them, and so they're a lot more ready to walk into a dressing room or walk onto a training field, um, um, than as opposed to just jumping on a plane and trying to hit the thing cold turkey. Yeah. That's pretty hard.
I have to imagine, I know what your number one answer for this is going to be, but give me some other places where this can be kind of done for American players, where American players can go and have success, or countries that are a little bit more friendly or favorable to an American player going and applying their trade.
Well, that's an excellent question, Brendan. There's a reason why so many Americans are in Germany. And there's more than 80 Americans now playing at various levels in Germany. They're not all in the first Bundesliga, but if you go all the way down from the first to the fifth, and they're all very high level relative to what we got in the United States. There's a lot of Americans. And the reason for that is that about 60 years ago, the German and American governments made a treaty, a labor agreement, that if a German company offers an American a contract, an employment contract, then they have to give them a visa. And so, a employment contract could be a professional football contract is considered an employment contract. And so when that is offered, you're in. Now, compare this to the UK, for example. And this makes me crazy when I hear people say, "Oh, I can get you into the EPL. I got a way to get you in." Bullshit.
No shot.
You can't do it. You got to be like 75% of your national team games to even be considered for a work permit over there. And I got firsthand experience with that myself. You can't get in. And so, of course, you have transfer of national team players, but they're already national team players. That's the reason they're getting in. Spain, Portugal, France, you've got very low quota on foreign players that are coming in. So now you're competing with journeymen, Brazilians and Africans and other ones to try to get in for maybe 3 or 4 spots on the entire roster. Okay, you look at Belgium and the Netherlands. You've got very high minimum salary thresholds that an American has to get. So unless the club thinks this is an impact player immediately, they're just not going to take a risk on it. They're not going to take a player that say, okay, in 7 or 8 months, he might help the first team, because you got to pay that salary, and the salary's probably generally higher than your average player's already getting. So that makes it really tough. Scandinavian leagues, sometimes it's better to stay home. It's nice to have that experience playing in Europe, and I know that Denmark, and there's good teams in Norway and Sweden as well. But they don't have that extra level of professionalism that you're going to see in France or Germany or Spain or something like that. And so Germany is low hanging fruit for Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of the way I looked at it was, if you saw that there were a lot of American players in a certain country, there was probably a reason for that. It definitely wasn't a fluke, because as you mentioned,
Mm.
there's certain countries like, yeah, England is always the funniest one to me, that players think that it's even realistic to go and play in the UK if you are an American player, because like you said, the number of things that you just listed there, in order to just be able to get a work permit to be able to go and play in a country like that, is national team experience, a transfer fee that is of a certain threshold, a salary that's of a certain threshold. So for some American players, and I speak to on this podcast a lot of players who are kind of the lower league grinders, the journeymen that kind of bounce around from place to place. And
Mhm.
the UK just really isn't the place to do it unless you're going to somehow figure out a way to get yourself a visa that's completely unrelated to soccer, and then parlay it kind of that way. But to just go in and do what we're kind of talking about of, can I get a work visa based on the fact that I'm a footballer, that's when you want to start lending yourself towards those Germanys of the world. And that's why you go and you look on Transfermarkt or Soccerway or wherever, and that Germany list of US players that are playing abroad is is quite steep. Again, and it spans all the way from the Bundesliga all the way down into the 5th, 6th division, because also, as you mentioned there, Finland, Norway, Denmark, places like that, sure, it might be a little bit easier for an American to get in there, but where's that league infrastructure for me to be able to skyrocket my career once I go and have some success?
Yeah, they could be good entry levels for players, but again, they have the same rules. If you're under 18,
Yeah,
you're not going to sign there either. And we deal with it here in the United States as well. Try to get a 15-year-old Dutch player into an MLS academy. You can't do it, because they're under the same scrutiny by FIFA, and nobody wants to get into. I mean, maybe some guys do it. People get away with robbing banks too, but that doesn't mean it's legal. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I definitely wanted to speak to you about this, because I think I come at it from a different perspective. I speak to a lot of players who have done it, whether they've gone to college already or whether they've already played for a number of years, and it's a really different animal to try and attack. Still one that's very difficult if you want to go and play professionally, if you are, above the age of 18 or above the age of 21 or anything like that. But there's a completely different element that now gets added into the mix when you are a player that's under the age of 18. It's kind of this balance between, you are a little bit more of a higher valued asset because you're younger, and we know how much age plays a factor in the youth system and in football players. But also there's a lot more things that need to be in place in order for you to go and be the next Christian Pulisic or be the next Weston McKennie. It's not quite as straightforward, I would put straightforward in quotes, as going over if you're a 20-year-old and just making it happen for yourself.
Well, that's exactly right. And I would encourage any player who's really driven to take a shot. It doesn't matter whether you're 18 or if you can find a way to go to, get into a program if you're younger than 18, as long as it's a reputable program and they're following the rules. But, I think anytime a player, he might be 19 or 20, or he finishes his college and he has an opportunity to take the shot at it. Why not? You got nothing to lose. And I think every play, and yourself, you go over and you live abroad, and you're playing abroad, and you're training, and your perspective and your whole, perspective, your paradigm for the game is shifting, and you're seeing it differently. And so then you have this comparative data when you're back in the United States, and you're using that comparative data to kind of not just bring yourself up to a higher level, but you can be involved with just helping to elevate the game at home through just by being aware of higher standards and how things are being done. So there's always growth opportunities, and so I would encourage anytime a player has a chance to have that experience abroad, to take it, go for it. You got absolutely nothing to
Yeah,
lose.
100%.
But I'm sure if you're under 18, you're being advised correctly.
Yes. What are the conversations that you have with families and with players? We might have spoken about this in a previous episode, but kind of when they're having that conversation with you of considering the talent project or considering going over to European country to have an experience like you offer, or they are more looking at the traditional route of going to a university, going to an NCAA institution in the States?
Let's take a quick break here to talk about support for the In the 11 podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's performance package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code 11 at manscaped.com. Now, if my math is correct, that's about 8 million balls. So listen, gentlemen, here's the deal. The Performance Package 4.0 has arrived, and it is a game changer, right? I know we got a lot of ballers that are listening to this show right now. We got a lot of coaches that are listening to this show right now. And I'm sure you're saying in your training sessions, I'm sure you're saying in the games, we got to take care of the ball. Why would you not be applying that to your below-the-waist grooming as well? You got to take care of your balls as well. Luckily, the Performance Package 4.0 and Manscaped is here to help you. So first off, we've got the Lawnmower 4.0. It is the future of men's below-the-belt grooming. It's got advanced skin-safe technology. It is waterproof. It has a 400K LED spotlight to give you that more precise shave. Say goodbye to the mess all over your bathroom floor. You can bring it in the shower with you. Like I said, it's waterproof, got the light, everything. No more mess. Easy. Done. Right? Same thing goes for your weed whacker, the ear and nose hair trimmer. You've got that proprietary skin-safe technology, which is going to help reduce nicks, snags, and tugs. It is also waterproof as well. Now, when it comes to your men's hygiene routine, when it comes to your ball routine, yeah, we got to talk about it, guys, because you got a routine for everything else, right? You've got a pregame routine, you got a postgame routine, you've got a recovery routine, but some of you might not have a routine for your balls, and you got to change that. So you got to get the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. You don't want to be that one, right, that comes in after the match and you've played 90 minutes, maybe you played well, maybe you bagged a goal, right, and it's just an absolute jungle down there and you're trying to clean and it's just, it stinks and no. Gone are those days, right? And who knows? You got a special someone, came out to see you play, right? Maybe you bagged a goal, maybe you got a clean sheet, maybe it was your debut, right? You want to be ready because I don't know what's going to go down after that game. That's up to you. Now, with all of that good stuff that I've just mentioned to you there, Manscaped has also hooked you up because in the Performance 4.0 package, they have also thrown in some extra goodies for you. They've thrown in the Manscaped boxer briefs, and they've thrown in a Manscaped little travel tote bag for you to carry around all of your Manscaped products. So you're on the road, you've got an away day, you're on the bus, you've got something, and you're equipped to bring all of your products with you on the road. Time to take care of yourself. Your balls are going to thank you. You got to go to manscaped.com. You'll get 20% off and free shipping if you use our code here at In the 11 Podcast. Use code 11, ELEVEN, to get 20% off and free shipping. So that's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code 11. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
When they are considering the Talent Project, or even if they're considering a different European experience, there's also a conversation that maybe leads itself to maybe a mom or a dad wants them to go to a college, wants them to go to an NCAA school and play and get their education in the United States. How do you kind of navigate that? How do you advise players or families about those two conversing experiences?
No, that's a great question, Brendan. I do have this conversation a lot with families, and they're very open and frank. For starters, you never lose by taking a time to educate yourself in Europe. You're not given that unless listen. We're sitting down having a contract discussion, and say your son is being offered a professional contract. That's a different conversation. But now, if you're saying, well, how my goal is I want to get to a top D1 college. Well, you have an opportunity to make yourself much more valuable to a D1 college because D1 coaches, or at least certainly the most enlightened ones, understand that players that come out of a European education are much more likely to be valuable from year one rather than year 2 or 3. Because and the best players in American college are guys that have come out of Bundesliga or Premier League academies. They've kind of hit the wall and they say we can't take you any higher, but they're really, really good players. And then they come into the college system and They might be 18 years old with a 23 or 24-year-old's maturity and tactical nuance and play and discipline and confidence and leadership and all these things that spring out of a really good professional education. They say, wow, I've got a guy that, I can, it maybe costs more money on the scholarship side, but he's going to be valuable for 4 years. And then otherwise you might take a kid in and say, look, if I've got 25 players on the roster, I can redshirt you, or, you're going to get a few minutes in these games here and there. What are you doing this for? You're wasting a year, so I think that when we're talking about it, first of all, you don't, by spending a year abroad, you're never giving up your college eligibility, not on that alone. And secondly, you're in an environment where you're getting probably somewhere around 450 intensive training sessions a year versus staying at home and getting about 175. And you're getting 30 to 40 competitive matches, and you're playing at a high level. You're learning professional habits. You're going to come back much more valuable to a college recruiter than a guy that necessarily might be. If everything's being equal, you're going to take the guy that's got the European education.
Yeah, because I'm sure, as you just alluded to there, you're probably fielding phone calls from both sides of it. You're speaking to the professional clubs in Germany that want to bring players in on trial, but I'm sure you're also fielding phone calls from colleges over in the States that are asking about your players and how they're progressing and how they're developing and who might be a good fit for their college programs as well.
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. A lot of our guys are going off. I mean, I would say this. I want to preface this because right now is the worst time in the history of soccer in the United States to be a graduating senior looking for a college opportunity, because just by virtue of a very short explanation, the NCAA granted a fifth year of eligibility because of the COVID disruptions. And now the college coaches are sitting there with, when they're thinking they're going to matriculate their seniors out, so there's room at the bottom for the incoming freshmen, they've got these guys another year. They've tied up their scholarship money. Their rosters are big. And so, it's almost a case of now they're saying, it's a better, this is a perfect time to take a gap year, let the market settle down a little bit, and then come in later, a year older, a little year more mature, a lot more training behind you, a lot more professional development behind you. And you might come in as a 19-year-old freshman instead. But you're going to be playing like a 23-year-old. Well, we're talking about the value to the program, how difficult it is right now to be a graduating senior trying to get into a D1
Yes.
program or a college program, because this rosters are congested. There's very little scholarship money available. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's not the normal market, and it's going to take probably till 2023, even 2024 before it gets back to normal. So it's a great time to take a gap year and do something. Try going abroad, or if you can't go abroad, then just play soccer for a while and develop yourself a little bit more and grow up a little bit and not come into college as your typical freshman. And you have enough. Really, it's a great opportunity. I mean, it's a crisis in some respects because everyone's expecting that, wow, 2022 is the year I'm going to enter college and start my college career. And you think, oh my God, this is, that's the end of the world because you can't do it. It's a wonderful opportunity to get better. And so it's that has brought a whole new way of looking at things. This is a great opportunity. You're not losing anything. You're just making yourself more valuable on the market by making yourself a little bit older and a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an opportunity to get a little bit more creative with your CV or your resume, kind of in the same way that you would look at a job, because as you mentioned there a little bit before, you have players from top Bundesliga academies or top European academies that if they don't quite make the jump within their club, they then decide to go over to the States and get an education. And those are some of the programs or some of the players that are being looked at by the top programs. Then you couple that with the fact that you have players who are staying for an extra year after their COVID year. And, it just produces this amount of competition for those spots that is such a small window for your kind of average, I guess, so to speak, American player. So maybe the way is to actually go and diversify yourself a little bit, give yourself a different experience and something different to put on your resume as you then go in and speak to those college coaches and say, the college coach is immediately going to think, oh, okay, that's something interesting because he's actually been overseas and done something that I don't have anyone on my roster that's an American that's done what that player has done.
Well, that's exactly right. All of a sudden, your application goes from this pile of applicants to this pile of applicants. Because there's an awful lot. If you're a college coach, and I was a college coach myself, and you get a lot of. I mean, this is no disrespect whatsoever to any of the kids, but you get a lot of them are just plain vanilla. They play for this club team, and it's DA level or whatever it is, ECNL or whatever it is. They're ODP. They go to this tournament, they go to that tournament, and they're pretty much the same. So tell me what stands out about that. If you're looking at for nuances, okay, you can see those nuances, but then you get one that says, I've done all this, but now I've got European education as well, professional development. And maybe they're with a professional club or a professional academy or whatever it is, but there's something that says, I think there's going to be something different about this guy. Let's put him over in this pile. This is the A pile, that's the B pile. So let's look at the A pile first, see what we can do.
Yeah. It's kind of like the companies that are getting resumes across their door, and all of a sudden they see one that has they have Google on their resume, or they worked they worked at this company. That it's immediately one that stands out to you. And there's certain places like, oh, okay, I played in Germany for a year. All of a sudden now maybe there's still not going to be that immediate we have to sign them, but there's going to be that initial conversation to at least just figure out what that experience was like for that player and get to know a little bit more about them.
Yeah, if they've been playing at a professional level, playing against top level teams, training twice a day, but not only that, but now they've shown that they have the emotional maturity to live abroad. They've the intellect to learn a new language. They have their GPAs, and if you have obviously if they clearly show that they're good academically, then that takes that question off the table entirely. But there's also that maturity factor that is so important, and they're not coming in again as guys. It's like a jailbreak the first time away from home, and
Yeah.
they're in the dorms. And, oh, what a great time! But now you've got guys that have actually had to work at it, and they've lived abroad, and that makes a big difference in how they conduct themselves and how they carry themselves. That's really, really important.
Absolutely. So now, what's the rest of your kind of abbreviated summer look like as you gear up, I'm sure, for another big trip overseas? What's the next couple of weeks look like, and what are you looking forward to this upcoming summer and into the fall?
Oh, we got a really, really exciting project that I'm only going to tease you a little bit. We got one coming up in 2023 that's going to blow the doors down, and it's going to be really, really exciting. And so I'm kind of laying the foundation for that.
Okay.
We're finishing up the recruitment for this year. We're pretty much done, but there's a couple spots I want to fill as well. I'm enjoying spending a little bit of time in the U.S., but I'm also excited. But we got a really good cohort. We've got three very solid teams coming together in August, mid-August, for preseason. We got a solid month of preseason where we're just focused strictly on team building and development and getting the guys settled and get to know each other and that sort of thing. It's going to be a really exciting time, and we have some new coaches we've added to the staff. We're also very excited about that, and so things are looking very optimistic for us.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're still trying to work off the jet lag, and I'm sure there's lots to do to try and prepare for the upcoming season. But I always enjoy our conversations, and thanks for popping in and sharing a little bit more about what American soccer is like and the future of it, and what European soccer is like.
Well, thanks, Brent. It's always a pleasure.
That's going to do it for my conversation with Mark this time. Like I said there, if you want to go and hear more of Mark, episodes 14 and 31 are the episodes for you. While you're poking around for those episodes, go ahead and check out some of the other recent episodes that we've done. We've had some amazing guests. We've had Christian Zucchini recently. Cam Vickers was a good one a couple weeks ago. Go check out David Lagorix. Go check out everybody that's been in the 11, because there's not too many that are misses, if I do say so myself, in my humble opinion. I want to thank you guys so much for your continued support, your continued listens, and encourage you to go ahead and follow the social media platforms where we're posting clips, we're posting content from the podcast episodes. So that's In the 11 Pod on Instagram and In the 11 Pod on TikTok are the two major platforms where we are posting right now. looking forward to a lot of exciting guests coming up and a lot of really good episodes that I'm excited to share with you guys. But without keeping you for too long, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.